Goeiedag! Good day, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world.
I've been looking around for salvation. I've been looking around for the truth. All around me I see frustration. I've been looking around for, and I looked all over till I found you. I've been looking around for, I sit and listen to your stories. All around me I see, and you're telling me, please don't worry. Lot in this world you should know, and love in life is where you should go. If you're looking for somewhere to go, if you're looking for someone to know, if you're looking for someone to guide you, then love in life will guide you. I know that life outside is so hard. There's a lot of things that can tear you apart. Sometimes feel lonely, but remember you're not the one and only.
Goeienaand, good evening fellow South Africans and citizens of the world, and welcome to tonight's live stream. And this is basically a follow-up with Richard Seed about his court case regarding allegations of title theft by a bank in South Africa. And the more I learn about this, the more I realize how common this is. You know, you think if you got a title deed on a property and you're living on that property, that it's yours. Well, apparently sometimes it's not. And I'm going to play you a little video clip to show you how common this is and how easy it is for a thief to steal your property. And this is in the USA, but it could happen anywhere in the world. Let's have a look at this.
Southeast Michigan's real estate market growing rapidly. According to Zillow, over the last decade, home values in the Metro Detroit area have appreciated by nearly 148%. And with that boom comes a rise in home title fraud. It's another form of identity theft where a fraudster sells the victim's property or refinances it, and when the mortgage is not paid, the property enters foreclosure. Tonight, 7 Action News reporter Faraz Javed shows us just how easy it is to trick property owners and what you need to know to avoid getting scammed.
Home title fraud is one of the fastest growing white-collar crimes in the country. And the worst part, it's extremely easy to pull off. Matthew Cox is a convicted home title con artist who served 13 years in federal prison for defrauding nearly $16 million.
I liked the house and I thought this is a decent house. I would go to public records and just transfer the title from them to whoever's ID I had, and then go open some bank accounts and then borrow against the property. I mean, it's that simple.
The 52-year-old says home title fraud used to be a skill. Now even a tech-savvy kid can pull off the scam.
The truth is, you could go downtown right now and find out a ton of information on any of your neighbors. You could file documents. Nobody calls to verify the documents.
Retired FBI agent Art Fitzenmeyer says most criminals are using the equity on the property to acquire loans.
Sometimes they'll even use the same property 2 or 3 different times for loans.
I rented a house from somebody one time and I borrowed like $500,000 on the house. And the house was in his name. The house was only worth $190,000. So I just took out 3 mortgages at the same time.
Home title fraud is one of the most underreported crimes because it's hard to trace the scammer or the money while the lender comes after the home.
The guy stole the monies off somewhere, on a white sandy beach with drinks that have umbrellas in them, and you're off to the courthouse with a $600 an hour attorney, and it takes at least 2 years most of the time.
To make matters worse, Art says the only solution for now is to have a monitoring service like Home Title Lock.
Title theft is not covered by your homeowner's policy, HOAs, banks, nothing. People think, hey, I've got title insurance. That concluded when you got the key to the front door.
Now, Matthew says that people can try monitoring their property deeds by themselves, but they will still need legal help if fraudulent activity is detected. I'm Faraz Javed, 7 Action News.
So there you go. That old slogan, safe as houses, doesn't seem to count for much anymore, does it? Well, tonight, of course, we got Richard Seed joining us again. And we're going to get an update on what's going on with his court case. And you might be surprised at what's happened in the courts since we last spoke. Let me get Richard on. Hi, Richard.
Hey, Scott, how you doing?
Good, yourself, mate?
Good, thank you. I hope you well. I'm doing good.
Yeah. Can we just get your, sorry, I just want to do something. Yeah, I've got those all here ready to go. That's fine. Okay, I'm just looking at those images you sent me. That's fine. All good. All right.
Okay.
Let's get back to you. Okay, so, Richard, you've had a busy time since I last saw you on a live stream, and we were talking about the case with your father's property. And would you like to just give a quick summary as to what happened? And then we'll get into the nitty-gritty.
Right, so what happened was that from the start of how this whole thing all started, or from court last week, Thursday? Okay, let's go for court last week, Thursday. So, yes, last week, Thursday, the 23rd of February, I was in the Johannesburg High Court over Teams, because my life was threatened. Within overnight, I was informed by CAP security that I do not go near the courthouse in Joburg because, there was threats that was monitored overnight, and I was told to speak to the judge over Teams, which I did. But
now, hang on.
Decided.
You just said your life was threatened.
Yes, it was given to CAP security that if I go to the courthouse, something could happen because I am going to expose what happened to the judge, and ABSA doesn't like it. And that is where the problem comes in. And it's very simple. ABSA Bank needs to actually sit around the table and talk about this and stop trying to organize threats by various people. And the judge is aware of it, and it's AJ Stratham who is the judge, and I believe he's 80% criminal cases. So I'm hoping to see that this case is going to be dealt with very seriously going forward. So what happened last week Thursday at about 2-3 in the morning, I was advised that I do not go anywhere near the court, and I have to speak to the court over Teams, which I did. Managed to get an advocate overnight as well. It's a lady. I
know the lady.
At this point.
Yeah, I know the lady.
Great.
Yeah.
So, yes, so she came at the last minute to the rescue. She did start speaking to me a couple of days before the case hearing so that she can step in should I have any problems going to court, which I did. And she had no problem going to the court for me to go and find out what is actually happening with this Rule 30 application that ABSA Bank filed in the Johannesburg High Court. And the sad thing is that ABSA had no right to actually file this application against me. What a Rule 50 application is an application, it's called an irregular step. For example, you're not allowed to file applications or affidavits before the court hearing or after the court hearing's been set. So meaning that that's it. But this time, in this case, it wasn't set. So meaning I was allowed to file a supplementary affidavit, which I did. And I wasn't out of line. But because it wasn't explained to AJ Stradom, the judge, that unfortunately he ruled in ABSA's favor to have the affidavit dismissed, which is a supplementary affidavit. It doesn't affect my court case. It's just extra evidence in a, you know, when you type and you make spelling mistakes and things like that, Scott.
Yeah.
I basically used a supplementary affidavit to rectify my spelling mistakes and correct my grammar and so on. But ABSA decided to do an application against me and put a cost order against me just because of that's how they operate. And I understand this is not the first time that ABSA does this to people to delay tactics.
Okay, so your court case is still going ahead, but
Yes.
the judge at this stage has said no, you can't file that supplementary affidavit.
Yeah, he wasn't aware of the case. What is actually happening with the Johannesburg High Court at the moment is that there's so many judges involved because of the complicity of this case. I mean, we're dealing about 5 judges or 6 judges. There's appeal judges involved. There's a lot of judges involved. And the problem is the banks are making it very confusing to the courts because they are trying to say that I'm doing an irregular step. In the meantime, I'm just following what my gut feeling says and what God tells me, not what ABSA tells me and what the banks tell me. I listen to the court's instructions.
Now, look, I just want to make this quite clear. To me, it's a simple, clear-cut case.
Correct.
Your father bought a property back in, what is it, 1989?
No, 1974.
1974, he bought a property.
Yes.
Okay, and he owned the title deed.
Correct, yeah. So what happened is I spoke to my brother just to confirm it the other day, Edward, and he said that he purchased the land from Sandton Farm in 1974, and then he built the house in 1975 to 76. And then my mother and my father moved into the property or into the house. So we were the only house on that earth extension. I think it's about 3 kilometers. There was 1 or 2, 3 houses back then. But on that Earth 970 extension 59 Morningside Sandton, we were the only house that was there on the farm, except the farmhouse as well. So
now the way I understand it, your father paid off the mortgage on that property, so he basically had it paid off. And it was put in the name of his trust.
When he passed away, yes. So my father paid off the property in 1979, and according to the 1989 title deed, it was paid off in 1989, but that was incorrect. The deeds office confirmed to say the whole mortgage bond on the house was 1979. It was fully paid off because my dad purchased the land from his previous property that was at where Investec Bank is today in Sandton.
Right.
And then in 1989, it was supposed to be split into 50% into the trust and 50% into my mother's title name, which will be Annabelle Kathleen Seed. But unfortunately, that didn't happen, which I will discuss tonight, what has been developed in the last couple of days.
Okay, now just for clarity, FNB were holding that title deed for some reason. Did your father have a loan against the title deed?
No, what happened is now because FNB was Barclays Bank DCO, and when I mentioned on the previous show that my father worked for British American Tobacco, which was Rothmans at the time, there was some altercation with the companies and FNB and so on. So I don't know if that was a conflict of interest, but I was told now a couple of weeks ago that it was a set-up operation and FNB was targeting all the employees of British American Tobacco back in the 80s. And when it comes to deceased estates and transfers of properties, that's when they will start attacking. And unfortunately, I was one of the victims, or my mother was.
Now, hang on. Why were they targeting employees of British American Tobacco?
Good question. I think it's all about money, and because British American tobacco was part of the government back then, or still is in a way, and because my father was in the Royal Marines and he was a captain and he was very wealthy, and I think that plays a big role, but it's still under investigation exactly what the reason is. Why did FNB, which is FNB DCO, or let's call it Barclays Bank DCO back then, why did they administrate an estate and not transfer the property correctly to my mother and make sure that the children are looked after, which we were 4 kids at the time, and I was the youngest, and none of us received any share of the property or the trust assets. They basically stating my mother got everything, including the trust money, and then it was all put into the trust, and then FNB just did whatever they want with it in 2001.
Okay, so just for clarity, what happened was that your father's title deed was transferred to a third party by a staff member at the First National Bank.
Correct, yes. What happened was in 2002, so in other words, let's get into the 1989, the title deed was transferred, it was done incorrectly. My mother and my brother had lots of fights with Barclays Bank then to rectify it, and then they stated it was rectified, then it wasn't. And then 2002 comes that Andre Investments gets involved. No one knows how he organized the bank employee who was the executor at the time of my father's estate, because that was wrapped up in 2001. And there was obviously some kind of deal that was planned, apart from Brian asking my mother in 2001, would my mother be interested of selling the property for townhouses, and you can get maybe about 10 million rand or so. It wouldn't be possible on a consolidated property, as I said on the previous show, because it's consolidated. Number two, it's on a heritage overlay zone, and it's historical land. There's a lot of rules you have to apply in the Johannesburg municipality, and I think it would have never flown by. Today it's still 2023. There is still no permission allowed on that Pacific block of 970 extension 59. Morningside Sandton. So,
but since this property was, according to you, illegally transferred to a third party, it's been broken up into about 10 different lots, hasn't it? To 10 different titles.
Title deeds, yeah. There's about 9 title deeds. Now there's 10. There's actually another one, Corbin Capital, Legacy Corbin Capital, whatever they're called now in 2022. So there was 9 title deeds that are defective, and my father's one is the only one that's legal. So if that is true, now there was another title deed last year. There will be now 9 defective title deeds, including my father. That will be 10, but 9 defective title deeds on that property. Yes.
Wow. Now look, this is rather like the government expropriation without compensation, but by this time it's been done by a bank.
Correct. It's always through the bank. The deeds office, I've learned now this week, now in the last 2 weeks since we last spoke, how does the deeds office actually operate in Pretoria? And it's been known to me, this is how it works. The conveyancers actually check to see if the company's legit or the buyer is legit by checking the IDs, numbers, and the CIPC reports and SARD documents and all of those things. The deeds office doesn't check any documents. They just make sure that you have your power of attorney, your city clearance council, your SARS documents. If you have a consolidated property, you have to provide an affidavit, and there's another document as well. What is the purpose of you buying the property? That's all the deeds office does. But my argument is in court is that why doesn't the deeds office check these things? No, they stated very clearly it's up to the conveyancers to check. The deeds office just check to see if those documents are filed, and if they are correct. If they're fraud, well, then go to court. That's how the deeds office operates.
So what we're saying here is that look, the banks would have their own conveyancing people because they deal in property a lot. So all it takes is for someone in the bank to put together the required information and then send the conveyancing guys down to the deeds office and transfer that property from your father's name into someone else's name. It's that simple.
Correct. Very simple. The banks, and this is what's actually quite sad, because the expert title deed person that won't be anonymous at this point, she actually said to me the other day that this is how the banks have been doing this for years under the radar, and the deeds office, all they do is take the blame for it, but then they just, because they know who's who in the zoo, and they just allow the people to go back to their properties. But someone like me who comes along, I have to go through the hard way and go to court. And yes, that's correct. The banks just do whatever they like. And the thing is, they have to explain on the record, that they have to take the blame for it.
Now, when we chatted earlier, you said something that really perturbed me. And that was the fact that the banks basically can just they sorry, let me just get this right. The banks apparently believed that your father had no dependents. They believed that he didn't have any children.
This was a new thing that was in the report. Yes, I was actually quite shocked.
So on that basis, someone in that bank, because they thought that this was an estate which didn't have any dependents, they basically took that property and gave it to someone else.
Basically, that's how they did it. So, in other words, what they would have done now in 1989, as I've read the report, is that they gave my mother the whole property, thinking that's what happened. In the meantime, they gave it to someone else in the background at the bank to make a plan with Andrew Investments. But at the same time, with all the assets as well in the estate, my father had a lot of British American Tobacco shares that was supposed to stay in the estate or in the trust until I'm 55 or when I'm 21
happened to
years
them?
old.
What happened?
They've disappeared. They're gone. I was speaking to one of Mike Boas's detectives, and they're busy investigating a lot with British American Tobacco, and BOD South Africa are busy looking into that, and they're trying to trace every single share that when my dad started in the 1960s with British American Tobacco to present, with the shares, they will still add up with the interest. They so far there's not one share that can be traced, but it's not impossible. They will find those shares. I know when I spoke to I think it was Johan Prinsley, he told me that they will find those shares. They will get it. There's no question about it. And I spoke to also the JEC. They are busy helping with the investigation. It's just very difficult now with all my dad's records not being found at his company. They are still searching for the records, but in the long run, they will get those shares back.
Now, look, there's one fact that cannot be overlooked, and that is that from our last time we discussed, you said that the property was apparently sold to this group or transferred to this group for 1.75 million rand. Now,
Correct, yeah.
that money, if the bank suggests that your mother sold the property to that other party, then she should have received 1.75 million rand. She never did.
In her bank account, correct? Yes.
Yeah, she never did. So
no, not at all.
What do the banks say about that 1.75 million rand? Who did it go to?
They refused to comment, and this is what I had an advocate last year on that, or 2021. That was Advocate Frank Stanley, and he asked this question to FNB Fiduciary. Oh, we are looking to it, but you need to apply a PIRE request. So a PIRE request was now done in 2022, and FNB still refused to answer that specific question, apart from all the estate questions. So they breach. Pretty much it's jail time for FNB Fiduciary either way, because they've done it on my mother's estate. They refused to answer a PIRE request, and I think you have 30 days, and then they ask for an extension for extra 30 days, and then after 60 days you can apply a court application. Then the judge can actually apply the PIRE law, which tells you how many years you spend in jail, or they can just give you a fine. So that answer to your question has still not been answered today.
Now look, what we're saying here, and the allegation that's been made, is that you got people working at banks like ABSA and FNB, who obviously work in the property and mortgage area, who are watching or looking out for basically the estate of people who die, and say, okay, these guys haven't got any dependents, we'll go and sell this shit off and make a shitload of money. That's basically what's happening.
Correct. And that's what the sad thing is, yeah.
So this is not only fraud, it's criminal, and yet you've got basically the top lawyers in South Africa protecting these criminals, these alleged criminals. And
Yes,
that's where you are right now, is your property, according to you, and I have no reason to doubt what you're saying, was basically your birthright was transferred to someone else, someone at FNB in this case, but ABSA Bank are very involved through the title deeds and things like that. These banks have basically taken your inheritance, and because they didn't realize that there were children involved, but the fact is that property was stolen from you.
Correct. So getting to that question, yes, the Master of the High Court Pretoria, there was a meeting last week with, I think it's Miss Roberts, that and her team in that. They looked at the records from the deeds office and the Master of the High Court, and this is what's going to go into their report, that the conveyancer was Finley Meyer in 1989. That did the transfer of the title deed from my father's estate to my mother. So the attorney of the conveyancers will take the responsibility if they can be found, or it's going to come from the treasury of the conveyancers of South Africa, money that's going to pay for the damages of 35 years or 34 years if they cannot resolve this, because it was stated like that exactly, that there was no children. It was just married out of community of property or in community. I don't know the exact wording they use, but the Master of the High Court can confirm of Pretoria that there was definitely no documents to state there were children involved. And if that was the case, I mean, why would you have a trust if there's no children involved? You wouldn't have a trust. So back in the 80s, it was compulsory to have a trust. So the Master of the High Court don't know what to actually do on this case. They just have to do a report of what they have and come to court and state this is what should have when you have children, and this is what should happen when you don't have children. So in this case, we will fall. So what do you do now? Everybody gets like a percentage of the property, and that's what should have happened. And when it comes to selling a property, it gets the person that will be my brother, in this case, Edward William Seed, that will have surety to sign the property off in 2002 with my mother and myself, because I would have been a trustee when I was 21, and because I was living on the property. So it will be me and my brother Edward to sign, as well as my mother, 2 Andre investments, and it would definitely not be 8 million. It will be definitely 8 million rand, but not 1,750,000, never in a million years, because 8 million to 10 million rand is a suitable price for back then on a consolidated property. If I understand correctly, it was now marketed now for auction. This is what SIU told me the other day by Pam Golding Properties. I think they marketed the property for auction for 24 million, which has now been stopped. So everybody's now up in arms, because I actually had a bit of an argument with SIU last week, because there's no ways they can actually put this property on auction. So the application to put it on auction, it was stopped, but they did do an evaluation for about 24 million for 4,000 squares. So that just shows you the difference between 10 million in 20 years ago, and 20 years later, it's 24 million. So let's say it's 14 million rand more.
Wow. I'm just showing people the images of the property at the moment. Now, one of these images, you've got red and blue lines on it. You know the image I'm talking about.
Can you? Yeah, just trying to go into the image there so I could see it. Yes. Okay. So what you're seeing there in front of you. Okay, if we want to go back to the other one, Scott, the one with the lines on it.
Yeah, I've got it. Yeah.
But those are the images there. Yeah. So what you're seeing there now is what the property look like. So we'll go from left to right, and I'll go through all of them.
Okay. So let's go to the first one. Okay. So.
Yes,
what I've got there is 146 West Road North, Morningside, Sandton. And
go ahead.
Yeah,
so what you're seeing there now, everything that's marked in red. So if you look onto your left-hand side, I think it's my left or my right, on what I'm seeing there is that the wall, that you see where the lawn line is between, there's a grey piece of wall there in the driveway. And that's been circled. And let's go to that image there. So if you see the wall that's split in the middle, that was put in 2004. Now, the argument in courts, they stated it was there in 1989 already. That's what their records say. Well, it's impossible because this was done in 2004. But I think this image, is later than that. But that Pacific wall where the trees are in the pool, that is where it's supposed to be split. But you can see it's not straight, it's skew. So anyway, let's go to this image now that we're looking at now, is that the driveway servitude is where the water line, the blue line is your water pipe.
Yeah.
That is underneath the wall. And the wall is on top. And next to it, there's a bit of I think there's a bit of a roof that's touching the wall. That needs to come out. And then obviously the wall needs to come out on the driveway as well as the bricks, because you're not allowed those bricks on a consolidated property. Not only that, it's actually within the servitude. So those bricks would need to come out in the driveway. And where the square block is, all of that needs to be demolished. So basically you're having half of that house being taken away. So the council said basically they have to destroy the whole house. They can't just keep half a house there, which is fine. I don't have an issue with that. That house where that red line is supposed to be further down the garden, and then the garden was supposed to be the other way around. So it's supposed to be switched because it's on top of a servitude as well. Where that red line is, where it's directly across the house of the straight across the roof of the tiles of the roof, straight down. I mean, you will see there's another servitude down there, which is also water. So that house is totally illegal where it is now. But I was told today they are going to look into relaxation rights and things. You can't. You're breaking the rules. Then you're breaking your council rules. And then everybody else who's got the same problem can commit a crime in South Africa. And then it's going to be worse. So it was decided that they'll stick to the original plan, that they will demolish everything that's covered in red will be taken out off the property. Yeah. If they do save the house, where it would be nice to keep a little piece of the section, then I could build onto it and build a studio and so on, because I'm in the TV industry. But if that's not the case, it will just be demolished completely, and then it will have to be re-landscaped. The power will need to be taken out. It's actually going to be a big job, but the council will make that decision in the next couple of weeks once that section of the court's case comes up, because it's a huge case. And what you're seeing now, that image there in front of you, is that is how the garden looked like in 2001 with all the trees. So what has actually been happening is that the courts are very confusing of exactly what happened, is that they've committed a crime wherever you look at it, Scott. It's actually been unbelievable with the stories that I've been hearing, and this report that I've got from the anonymous expert deeds person that understands title deeds. I mean, I cannot be grateful for what she has done. I mean, she knows this stuff from backwards because she's been doing it for a lot of cases, and I'm actually surprised.
Just tell me, obviously the title deeds have got a record of the ownership of that original property that your father had. Whose signature is on the transfer of that property from your mother's estate to that investment company with the guy who lived next door to your property? Whose signature is on that? Is it the bank's? What is it?
That's what no one knows at this point. On the Lexus Wind deed, title deed, my mother's signature is on there, but it's a copy of it, and it's not exactly her signature. So we don't know where that signature comes from, but the other two signatures that are on the left-hand side, no one knows who those signatures are. And there's a conveyancer at the time that is working for STB attorneys. Her name is Morley Swat. Her name is on that title deed of the power of attorney, and she needs to come to court. But her attorney, I think it's David from STB attorney, saying that she wasn't registered in 2002, so she didn't transfer that property. She's only done it now in 2021 for the first time. So that is where the argument comes in. So I was instructed by the court yesterday to cite her to court, because she would need to explain who's Fiat Trump attorneys, who is the signature which says Morley Swat and her name. And she has to answer that. If she can't answer it, well, then she's going to have to go through a lie detector test, and she's going to have to go through a lot of investigation, because that is the only way you're going to get the answer of why did Fiat Trump attorneys exist in 2002 if they actually closed practice in the late 90s or early 90s. So there's a lot of issues there. So then once they can discover that, then we can ask the question, how did my mother sign that signature if it's not her signature, or is it her signature? They need to explain, because it has been verified by copies of my mother's signature by some text experts as well, and they said to me it's a copy, and besides, her initials are not the same, so it's not really her signature. If you could, I mean, it's so easy to copy signatures, and if my mother did it, she would never sell it for $1,750,000 and put the children at risk, including me, that doesn't even have university degrees, and my dad would have left that house to me for the rest of my life, so I could have my family there and I could live the seed family generation.
Now, look, there's a compounding factor here now, but this is the first time I'd realized this, and that is that it wasn't just the title deed of the house that was transferred, it was his shares which were sold. So it's not just the house in isolation, there's a whole lot of other assets which were disposed of at the same time. So So basically what you're getting to the shares. So this is what would have happened. And now I understand how states get wrapped up. So if we go into, after you've passed on, the bank gets your records from the family of what assets you own. Then they go through to the disputes of South Africa, and they do a title search of all your bank accounts, all your policies, and all of that. So the banks, if they see a lot of money, they will just steal it and not let you know. So that is what basically happens is, and then they get to the point is that my mother would have got all those shares, got the house, but because the bank is in charge, my mother wouldn't have known what my father had. And the property, you may think the title deed is done correctly, but in the meantime, it's not, because my mother didn't have the title deed in 1989. In 2002, it was just given to my mother saying that's her title deed, and that was that. So it's been a huge fight since the late 80s and 2001. My brother was telling me the other day they did have a big argument with the bank, but they just seemed to say go to court. And that's what happened. It just, my mother got legal-wise involved to sort this out, and then it just got worse and worse. And then 2002 comes, the property is now sold. Legal-wise is doing nothing about it, but they did an application in 2003 to the court, and then it just dragged on and dragged on. But I've learned now the other day that legal-wise is also on the panel of the banks, and this shows you that it was a total setup. Well, look, I learned that last week South Africa was put on the grey list, which
I heard so too.
Yeah, which basically means that it's a very small list of countries, and South Africa is one of them. In fact, South Africa is the only one in the G20 on the grey list, and what that's about is money laundering through the banks. That it's all about using the banking system to launder money. That this is what the grey list is, and South Africa's on that list. Clearly, there's something wrong with the way the banks are operating in South Africa.
And that's why they're using property to basically money laundry. And if you've got assets, you can claim a property. Say, I've got a property, I want to put it onto onto whatever you want to do to get a loan of money, and then you're just selling it to yourself. And that is what Andri Investments did. Andri Investments in 2002 sold the property to two individuals in 2003. And then they sold it now to the sixth respondent, which is now from the National Lottery Commission. But what I learned now from the investigator is that all of those six respondents were part of the National Lottery Commission in some kind of form, and they just did money laundering backwards and forwards, and the banks were involved. And this is why the bank, ABSA, is behaving like the way they are. If they had nothing to hide, they wouldn't object to the Rule 30 application, which they filed. They should have dismissed it and allowed me to go to court. But now they put a cost order against me of X amount millions. But it doesn't bother me because I'm going to take that money anyway when I win in court. But ABSA is not actually realizing that they're burning themselves into the ground, because the more the bank carries on, the worse it's going to get for them. And this is not just me saying it. I've been told this from SIU and the investigators involved, that this is definitely jail time. And the banks don't realize it. And you actually ask yourself, do they believe in God or don't they? Because I always put a little message there, preach the word, that I ask them a question and they don't respond. And it's actually quite sad, because I even told this to the advocates that's now representing me in court. Why are they doing this? And it's like they are blind.
That's absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's like, you know, how can you be blind to something that you've committed? Why don't you just pick up the phone and say, Mr. Seed, please can we sit down and discuss this, because we've realized we made a big mistake, but we can't do this anymore. Let's just call it a day and resolve the problem. But they don't want to do it.
You know,
since that live broadcast that I did with you the other day, I'm actually surprised, Scott. No one has actually said a word from the attorneys about this interview that I did with you a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, well, look, as you know, the first time we did an interview regarding ABSA was with Johan Ruet. And an hour before we went live, I got a legal letter from Weber Wenzel threatening me with defamation if I went ahead. And I've heard nothing from Weber Wenzel since then. Not a sausage.
I'm surprised, because they are also on case lines as well, and they're also involved with the case. And they just haven't said a word to me, and not even Alex Wright and Alan Launders. I mean, they're the main attorney firm for ABSA. They haven't said a word because they know they dare not. Because not because my dad was in the Royal Marines and they are watching this case left, right, and centre, which they are. I had a call from one of the captains from the Royal Marines the other day to wish me luck, and said that we've got your back. So should anything go wrong in court, we are ready. So that's a good thing. So at the end of the day, I know I'm covered there, but the thing is, they've got to realize that it's not about giving me back the property and the shares. It's about giving an apology, and actually people that they've done wrong to as well. Give back the properties, what you've stolen, because at the end of the day, you're going to have to go to God one day and you have to say, I did the right thing, because if you don't, you're not going to go to heaven. You're going to go somewhere else.
You know what freaks me, Richard? What freaks me is the fact that you've got these obviously these guys are managers within a division of ABSA Bank or FNB or whatever, who've now are basically looking out for estates where they've actually got the title deeds and stuff like that, and they're looking for estates where there are no dependents, and then they're flogging everything off for their own benefit.
That's the sad thing,
I mean,
because
that is horrific.
It is. It's very sad, because now, Scott, when I've moved back to my dad's property and I've got my studio going and everything, I'm going to do a proper show with you of the whole thing from start to end once I've got all that information. Because what's happened now is I was at the deeds office of Pretoria in November last year, and they know that this case has been going on for years. Mr. Van Wyk and Ms. Hunter, they were involved with this case for many years. Because my dad's title deed was missing, and this is why the property was being transferred so many times. But getting to the Master of the High Court, getting to your question there, yes, the Master of the High Court doesn't know if there's children or not, because the banks, as soon as you want to go to the Master of the High Court and say whatever you want to say, FNB will just turn around and say, no, it's not going to happen. So they will just lie just to steal all the benefits of the assets of the trust. But you don't know what the story is until the whole timeline, because what I'm hearing now in courts, it's a big confusion. But the Master of the High Court rather have this interstate succession and not actually get to the bottom of it, because it's very complicated. And it's actually quite sad, because what should have happened in this case is that when my father passed away, he was about 60, and I just wish he was alive today, because he would have been very proud of me, and I know he is, for this fight. And he would have been 94 this year, and I think he'll be 95 in May. And my dad's legacy is going to stand up, because I want to get to the bottom of it. What actually happened when the estate was administrated? Because I know my brother told me they did go to the Master of the High Court in the 1989, in the 90s, just to go and sort this issue out, because it wasn't done correctly, the transfer. And when do the assets get paid out? But then I learned that it gets paid out when you're 21. So I was 21 in 2001, and that's when the assets will be paying out of the shares and everything every month to the 4 children that were still alive in 2001. And obviously I'll get a bigger amount when I'm 55, when I'm retired, and the trust will still continue. That's what's supposed to have happened. But in this case, it didn't happen. So 2001 came, and if I understand correctly, my brother went back in memory lane, and he said that they tried to fight it, but because he was living abroad at the time, it was very difficult. And my mother was in her 60s. She was 61, I think, when the property got sold by Under Investments, who bought it. But the question is, how did this all happen without my mother not realizing? Because we definitely didn't do an offer to purchase. We definitely didn't do paperwork. If the courts, now if this is now ABSA Bank, if they can find the original offer to purchase, the original bank transfers, the original everything, then I'll call it a day, because then we know that it's but either that, it won't call it a day, because what happened was in 1989 the conveyancer committed the crime by telling the Master of the High Court there's no children involved, and that is what is in this report that was given to me by the title deeds experts.
Wow. Well,
it's bad.
Well. Look, from what I can see, there are quite a few laws that have been broken in this whole process.
Oh, yes. You should see the report, Scott. The laws have been broken, especially the draft order that was given to me, I think, by the court, or was on case lines that I saw. There's so many laws that's been broken in the Deeds Act, the Estates Act, I think the town planning laws. There's a lot of laws that's been broken, so you're 100% correct on that.
Now, for people who are listening to this live stream now, and people who might watch later, I guess the simple message here is, don't trust the bank. Never trust the banks. I've actually realized now, and I was actually talking to the deeds expert today, and her heart is actually breaking every day because of me. She only got to meet me for the first time now, and she's been involved with this case for years. And it's actually quite sad, because now that she learned from the previous Loving Life episode that I spoke about, and she actually came on board pretty much straight after that. And she said to me, I'm actually going to step out now, and I'm going to tell you that I was involved with this years ago. And I'm glad she did do a fantastic job, because, it's not, she said to me today, that's just the beginning. You should see what I'm going to compile when it comes to that section of the court case. It's going to be bigger. But, at the end of the day, once the Master of the High Court has put all the evidence together, then she would be able to do her final report. But this is a stepping stone, what I've read. It's just shocking. It's quite sad that the conveyancers, at the end of the day, Scott, it's not the banks. They're going to get away with it because they're going to blame the conveyancers, and the conveyancers that will have to pay the damage on behalf of the banks. But at the end of the day, the banks organize the conveyancers. They provide the conveyancers. They pay the conveyancers every month to just do whatever they like on estates and that. So the banks should take the blame. But what I learned last week, Thursday,
that the judge was in favor of the bank for that specific Rule 50 application that was filed, but the judge wasn't aware until a day later when he realized he didn't make a mistake. In a way, he did, but he's making up for it. I was told that he's going to deal with it with the advocate next week. So who knows what's going to happen? At the end of the day, it is a criminal case, or it could be another thing. Maybe the judge was in favor of the bank just to sign the order so that he can nail the bank in the next case, because he is a criminal judge. So that's a good thing. I just don't know. So I was a little bit disappointed, but then I realized, let me check this judge out and see his history. And then I saw his 80% criminal cases. So I thought maybe he's actually wanting ABSA to actually go under. That's the way I see it.
Right. Now, this all happened, I think it was in 2002 that you and your mother were kicked off the property. You were basically evicted. Because of the transfer, the alleged illegal transfer of the title deed to this other party. They actually had you evicted from the property. Now, that's 20 years ago. Why has it taken this long to actually get to this stage?
This is why I blame LegalWise. Randburg LegalWise took on the case in 2021 when Brian actually confronted my mother about wanting the property. LegalWise did a restraining order, but it didn't go anywhere, so there was nothing that could be done because it was getting to a stage later in 2001, that Brian was getting a bit aggressive with my mother, and it was getting a bit unpleasant, and we realized something's not right here. And, because my mother was in her 60s, she was finished working, and I was, 21 at the time, and I wasn't always there, knowing about law and title. In fact, I didn't even know what a title deed was when I was 21. I didn't even know what an offer to purchase was when I was 21. But what I can tell you is that my mother didn't do anything. I didn't do anything. My brother didn't do anything. We were quite happy to live there. And besides, Scott, before I get your question, why would my mother want to sell a property if it's 4,000 squares and it's actually a ground value today of 24 million? I mean, it's a lot of money. And besides, it's my dad's legacy being taken away from me because my father sacrificed his life for that property, and he knows that little kid that you see in the background, that's me and that's my father. And I want to make my father proud, and I will make my father proud by winning. And he was Mr. Rothmans back in the day for the Durban July and the Cape to Rio sailing regatta. And my father, I'm going to get a book made about what really happened here. But the problem is, LegalWise should have made sure that they do their job, but because I was told the other day they're on the panel of the banks and there's nothing that could be done. But my mother was on a gold membership with them. Why would they do something like this to my mother? Why did they not protect my mother? Why did they not make sure that FNB did wrong? But then you get your question, why did it take 20 years? Because they were behind it as well.
So it's not that you haven't been doing anything about the illegal transfer of the title deed for the last 20 years. It's just because of all the technicalities and all that sort of stuff.
And the investigation, yes. Yeah, look, the main reason is my dad's title deed was missing. So we could scream, we could stand on our heads, we could do whatever we want. Until my dad's original title deed in the deeds office is found, that is when we can only do something. And I understand from Mr. Van Wyk that there was another guy named Victor, I think, found the title deed in the storage archives. It was hidden, but they got the complete title deed, not what was on the internet. In fact, there was no title deed on Lexus Windeed. It was only uploaded now in the last year or so. So I've been told. They've got the timeline. There's a whole, Scott, what's actually quite scary now? The title deeds that's busy being manufactured now on Lexus Windeed is actually quite scary. They were downloaded yesterday. And they've now been added to the reports. So they compared the title deeds that were downloaded 4 weeks ago and the ones that yesterday was downloaded. There's 4 title deed signatures that have been changed. And it's actually quite scary. I don't even want to know, because the deeds office is also, They actually have no answers to answer what's actually going on here. But the sad thing is, getting to your question, why it took so long, it's because of the investigation. It's because nobody wants this matter to go to court, because as far as they're concerned, I'm nobody. And I'm the only seed family member of my father that's here in South Africa. My brother lives in the US. And it's not about them threatening me and so on. Cap Security, they've been monitoring my dad's property for the last 10 years or so with the various investigators. And they've been following this case very carefully. And they advised me not to go to court. And that was a good thing what they did, because there was a threatened note that was given to someone. And I actually don't know what's going on, but it's all these scare tactics. And I know my gut feeling, it wasn't a good day to go to court that Thursday, but I was on Teams and I was waiting for the judge to actually speak to me, but he refused to, which is fine. I don't mind. I spoke to the registrar, but they said my advocate's in court and they will handle it. But when I spoke to her that day, she said that the judge wouldn't speak to her either because she wasn't on record. So now she's on record. And now hopefully things are going to be dealt with now, because it's actually quite sad, because for those that are on your show tonight, if they are in Morningside, Sandton, I would like them to go past that property, and then they'll see the security guards and all. And I'm sure if you go and stand there for 10 minutes and you believe in God, you will feel the energy on that property is not right. And a lot of people have told me that that property's got a lot of bad karma. But then when I told them the story, my father passed away on that property, and my father's spirit would have done anything just to cause the drama, which is good and a bad thing. But, at the end of the day, it's not nice to have drama. But my dad would have fought for me, and he'll still fight for me till I get my dad's house back. Because, Scott, I want to tell you something. When I showed you that video, that was done in 2021 at the property. I felt so at peace. I've been there a couple of times since then, with the conveyancers and the police and the media. I think Carte Blanche was there as well, to do the servitude thing and that sort of stuff, I think early last year. And it was so peaceful. And even the producers at Carte Blanche, they are horrific of this case. But because there's so many laws for the banks stopping the media to broadcast this, I mean, at the end of the day, Carte Blanche is going to be doing a big story when it goes to court. And I know this for a fact, because I'm constantly speaking to the producer and keeping him updated of what's happening in courts. Last Thursday was a small little thing. I didn't think it was small. I thought it was a big deal. But then I only realized it was only the Rule 30 application and not my whole case, as what was supposed to have happened. But I know that my case is going to be heard next week on the motion of court application, which will be an ex parte application, which is a one-sided thing, and that's how it's going to be, because that's what the judge has said, and that's how it's going to be. And then ABSA can go and scream and shout and go and sue everybody, but at the end of the day, the property doesn't belong to ABSA, it doesn't belong to FNB, it belongs to the Seed Family Trust.
Well, the real victims in this whole chamos are those who've actually now bought pieces of the property. They got houses on those pieces. They're going to lose everything.
I'm going to tell you now what's going to happen. All those respondents, let's go with the second respondent. I'm not going to mention names this time. I was advised not to. The second respondent, she lives in Cape Town, and I understood she's never lived at the property. She wanted the property for an investment. I'm still trying to get clarification on that with her, but her attorney said that she's not going to speak until she's cited to go to court, which the court will do when it's her time to come and speak, to explain how did she get the property from Undri Investments, and how did she get it from, was it advertised in the media, how did she do the paperwork. All of that has to be explained by the second respondent. There's no way she can get out of it, because there's a 15 million rand fine that she's going to be responsible for from the council if she doesn't explain everything that happened on that property, because A, there's a legal subdivision, B, there's a wall on top of a servitude, C, there's alterations in my dad's property that she did, but there's no town planning permission for that. So there's a lot of issues to play out there. So I advised her when I did the affidavit to state, but I've heard nothing since I did that affidavit to the attorney firm, that she needs to come to court. But I understand last week from the registrar that every single respondent on that property is going to come to court, which is the 6 respondents. I think there's only 5 that exist, or 2. It's the 2nd respondent, the 5th respondent, the 3rd and 4th and 6th respondent don't seem to exist. They're gone, they're dead, no one knows what's going on there, and obviously the banks. So what will happen is that I will get the property back. ABSA will have to go and sue everybody, the conveyancers and everybody. The 2nd respondent will need to go and sue FNB and the conveyancers of who did the sale and the transfer and so on, especially 2021 STB attorneys. There's jail time there, I was told as well, and it was confirmed to me yesterday that they should have never ever transferred that property in 2021, and they should have listened to the police and me as well. STB, there's a lady named Anastasia from STB attorneys, and she knows. And I've got the recordings as well of Wayne Brownhill, who was in his pajamas in March when he was under a sting operation, and it's on the camera footage as well from the property of every word he had said. And there's proof that he had spoken to Anastasia, the attorney, and that he was warned to stop selling the property. But no, let's carry on and selling it, and then get it right, and then at the end of the day they think they can get away with it. So there's another big law firm, STB attorneys. They're going to be struck off the roll. I know this from Legal Practice Council if they're found guilty. So I'm not worried. At the end of the day, their time is up for this corruption to end, because all those conveyancers that did the transfers have to take the blame. And I've spoken to the fifth respondent's attorney, very nice man. He's a conveyancer, and he's also identified the fraud and so on. It was before his time. It was in 2003 backwards, not when he transferred the property. But at the end of the day, when he transferred the property, he had different people's names that was not on the CIPC reports. So he didn't know what to prove. So he said to me, he's going to come and testify in court. He has no problem with that, because he's realized he's a God believer, and he's here in Pretoria, and he doesn't want to see me suffer anymore. So he said to me 2 days ago, actually 4 days ago, he will testify in court for me on the conveyancing side of how it's supposed to be done. And at the end of the day, he doesn't care. He's no longer on the panel of the banks. In fact, he doesn't really care at all, because justice must be done, especially on that property, because it's my seed family home. But Scott, another thing is, it's up to the respondents that are currently alive and that are affected. Actually, to be honest, I don't think they even care. The 2nd respondent or the 5th respondent, they don't really care what happens. But it's up to the NPA to decide what's going to happen to those respondents. Are they going to pay back the money? I mean, the people want to know, is the NPA wants to know, especially SIU. They don't understand how the 7 million rand cash took place on the property in 2012, 2013. I mean, the bond that was transferred in 2021 by the 2nd respondent, no one knows if the 2nd respondent even got that money. If she did get that money, will she have to give it back to the bank? I don't know. It's up to her when she testifies in court what the judge decides.
Well, look, all I can say is that, wow. I
know the case backwards.
Yeah. Look, Richard, look, thank you for coming on tonight and giving us an update on what's going on.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you an update before you go. Is going forward is that we've had all the sections that's been done, and the problem is with Lansdowne, the attorneys. I just want Alan Launders and Rob Skolks, the advocates, and Jean Pretorius to actually sit down with me and say, look, let's talk about this, because this is obviously not going anywhere. But because there's this dark cloud over their eyes, and that's God's power, and I believe this to be true because I know this from Leon Depree. He's from Encounter Church, and he told me about these people. I've had a good talk with him, and their eyes are in darkness, and this is why they're behaving like this. But the judges are also getting stuck. So what's going to happen going forward, and I'm hoping and I'm praying from the advocate that's taken over my case, is that they're going to resolve this matter next week, one shot, because I just want to move back to that property so I can start my life. And then when I come onto your next show, Scott, I'm going to say I'm back at the property. Let's go for a tour, and then you're going to be more happy than what you are seeing right now, because it's actually it's devastating, and it's not nice to see me in this position. And I mean, I'm basically on breaking points because I'm keeping myself together because I know I'm 2% away to win. But because the banks and people threatening me, I don't sleep at night. I mean, security is driving up and down at night on bikes. And I'm constantly, my phone sends a message to make sure I'm safe. Because what happened on Thursday in court, that early hours of the morning, it was some anonymous person, but they're going to find this person. He was actually from some other country that caused this threat.
Wow. Well, look, South Africa is a basket case. I mean, as Andre de Ruyter said, when it comes to Eskom, these ANC cadres, these cartels who are committing crime in Eskom, they've got a special group of 60. This is 60 to 70 hitmen, people who take out whistleblowers, people who take out enemies of these cartels. They're actually on the pay. They actually get paid. 60 to 70 people, professional hitmen.
Ridiculous. And it's very sad. And Scott, I'm not even a whistleblower. I have nothing to do anything, and I'm just a normal human being. But people are thinking that I am a whistleblower and I'm giving information. No, I'm not. All in my title.
What you're doing is you're rocking the boat. You're rocking the boat. That's what you're doing, and that's why they're coming after you too.
They're trying to, but they don't realize, hang on, it's in the documents. It's not just talk. Like everybody else might think it's just talk. And yes, what's happening with Eskom, it's actually quite sad everywhere. But if it's all in the paperwork, why doesn't the court system and people listen to the paperwork, don't just listen to talk? Because talk is cheap. What's on paper is what the truth is, especially with affidavits. If you are alive and you can testify in court, you do your affidavit and you come to court as well, and you tell the truth. Because at the end of the day, there's no question. I mean, there's all those title deeds. I mean, the banks can say they're not fraud. In the meantime, the courts know it's fraud. I actually spoke to one of the judges from the Constitutional Court. I think his name was Mr. Khan, last week. And he told me that this case is going to go to the Constitutional Court no matter what, because all the laws have been broken.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's very sad. And Scott, I mean, what can I do to make this speed up? I don't know. I pray to God every night. I mean, I just, I actually don't know. There's no point even speaking to the attorney firm of ABSA anymore and say, guys, I mean, I could go to any media and say the same thing. They don't want to actually admit they're wrong. It's not about admitting you're wrong. Just fix the problem. Let's work together. Let's change South Africa because, if I could give a message to the president, Ramaphosa, and say to him, what I've gone through, I will go and have a cup of coffee with him when I win, because I will say to the president, with my case, when it changes, it's going to be a new South Africa, because I believe in my heart, once I win my case, things are going to change in South Africa, because I believe in God every day, and I pray to God, I want to see my dad's house be given back to me, and I want to see everyone else get their houses back, just one after the other, and not to say anything bad to the banks, just to say to the banks, it's not about winning and losing, it's about doing the right thing. Stop the fight. Same with Eskom, same with the ANC, everybody. Let's all work together and help each other.
Yeah, well, look, I just want to let Weber Wenzel know, because I know that they follow these live streams. I just want to let them know that we're doing another live stream. It'll be probably early April. And it's going to be about property syndication, which apparently is a huge a termite's nest. And so we'll be discussing that in about a month's time. Mate, look, Richard, thank you for joining us and to give us the update. Good luck with
I'll keep giving you updates as I go along.
Please do. And, look, clearly there's something very weird that's happened here. And if there are people at FNB and ABSA Bank who are basically looting the estate of people who die, if there are no dependents, and then basically walking off with the money, that is just horrific. And I think this is a wake-up call for people to be very careful about where you leave your title deeds, because, you know, I remember the old thing was that you left your title deed with the bank, and you left a very small mortgage on your property because that way your title deed was going to be safe with the bank. Well, this is a wake-up call for people.
Let me go on to that one quickly, is that when you buy a property on a mortgage bond, yes, it is correct, the bank keeps your title deed for the duration. Let's say it's for 20 years. Well, then you're only going to see your title deed 20 years later. But then what happens if you have defects on the property, or somebody's going to knock on your door and say, listen, you stolen my property? Then you're going to go to court and this and that, and then the court's going to say, well, you got a bond on the property. You're not entitled to the property. You're going to lose the property because there's a dispute on the property, and so on. And it's also quite sad, you know, the banks can do whatever they want in that space of 20 years, you know. In this case, on my dad's property, these title deeds were paid off within 2 years after they were purchased. I mean, they weren't big bonds, but the problem is, the problem starts in 1989. It should have never gone any further than 1989. And that is what the expert deeds report says, that the problem starts with the 1989 conveyances. In fact, all the conveyances play a role, including the fifth respondent's conveyancer. But, you know, we've spoken about it. I had a meeting with him 2 days ago as well, actually last week. And he said to me that he thought he had done something wrong, but he realized it was the conveyancer backwards before he did, because he checked all his documents, and I looked at the documents with him, and it was definitely not any of the people that purchased the property on that property from the Lexus, the CIPC search report. So there's a lot of questions on that. But once your bond has been paid after 10 years or so, then you're supposed to get the title deed. But now what I learned is from the second respondent, she's never got the title deed. So the attorney firm that was now STB Attorneys in 2021, they had to get the...
You must pay an attorney to transfer it into your name.
Okay, you got to pay an attorney to transfer into your name.
Conveyancer after you paid your bond.
Yeah, so that's how you're going to do it. You're going to pay, you know, your conveyancers, and it's all attorney fees, Scott. So what you understand is that's my partner. She deals with not title deeds, so she knows the law as well. She actually helped put the case together, and she understands title deeds backwards. And the sad thing is the 2021 conveyancer did wrong, and all the conveyancers did wrong. But getting to your question about the title deeds, it comes a mission for the bondholders. Once you paid your bond, I've seen a lot of stories, and I think that one in April is going to be interesting. Because what happens when you paid your property off? You can't get your title deed back from the bank.
Yeah.
You struggle.
All right. Richard, thank you so much. And look, keep in touch and let me know what happens. And you've got a good lawyer working for you. I know her well. And
I'm glad you do.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to seeing it. After the show, we'll have a brief chat, and you can just tell me some pointers there, because I really would like to know what I'm in for with this. I've been told from the expert title deed lady that she's got this case 100%. She's got this case going, yeah. And I'm looking forward to seeing what...
That's going to be critical, I think. I think that what she produces to the court is going to be explosive. And
that's what I hope and pray for. Look, especially with this report from the deeds expert. With that report and my motion of court application next week, it's going to be fireworks. And I'm telling you, once I've won, I'm back in my dad's property. Then I'm going to deal with the estate case, and then I'm going to deal with, look, it doesn't matter how much money I get at the end of the day. I know what I said to God I'm going to do is I'm going to put money aside, and I'm going to help other people who have lost their houses in the same position with me, and hopefully this advocate that I'm using now is going to actually start giving people their houses back, and we can start doing a difference in South Africa, because it starts with a small property like mine. It's not a mansion. It's a property in Morningside. It's not Cape Town. It's not Clifton. It's a property that's, it's been 20 years fight. And when I get my story across around the world, I would like to start making a difference in South Africa in other means, with the money that I make and all of that. So I've got some plans with God, and God knows what I want to do when I get that property back. And I just want to see a difference in South Africa, because if this case can be resolved I mean, it's so easy to be resolved. It didn't even have to go to court, so I've been told. But fortunately, that's how the system works. You've got to go to court because you've got to put the criminals away where they belong.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us, Richard. And
thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. And look, have a good evening and good luck with your court case.
Will do. Thank you very much, Scott. I'll talk to you after the show.
Okay. Cheers, mate. Bye for
Cheers,
now.
man. Okay, bye.
All right, guys, that was Richard Seed, and we were talking about the very weird case with his title deed, and that's apparently been taken by the bank. And yeah, look, it's a very, very strange situation there, and we're getting a lot of people coming forward to us with allegations against the big banks in South Africa. I'm going to leave it at that, but thank you for joining us tonight, and I do apologize that the side chat was not working this evening. I'm not sure why that happened, but have a great evening, and don't forget tomorrow night I'm going to be talking to Dr. Peter Hammond, and we're going to be talking about what's going on in Ukraine and a few topical issues in South Africa. Have a great evening, and bye for now.
Ons loop hand aan hand op goue warm sand. So baie wat ek wil hê, so baie dit brand. Ek staan op my rots, met golwe wat bots. Ons het geen vrees, want hy is in beheer. Ons sien al die bladde van goddeloze mannen. Ons weet gaan nie weet nie, dis geskryf soos 'n duif. Ons sal wen, aanhou gaan, want hy is in beheer. Die winde waai sterk, dis kragte wat werk. Die gevoel in my hart, dis vrees wat wil brand. Ons is boere met trots, met my hand teen my bors. Ons ken geen vrees, want hy is in beheer. Ons sien al die bladde van goddeloze mannen. Ons weet gaan nie weet nie, dis geskryf soos 'n duif. Ons sal wen, aanhou gaan, want hy is in beheer. Ons sien wat gebeur, die leer sal ons nie steur. Die gaan nog 'n keer, ek is stil, want ek weet hy is in beheer. Ons sien al die bladde van goddeloze mannen. Ons weet gaan nie weet nie, dis geskryf soos 'n duif. Ons sal wen, aanhou gaan, want
stand here.